The Alaskan wilderness was Ryan Morgan's sanctuary. As a geologist, he relished the isolation and unspoiled beauty of the rugged terrain. The towering pines, jagged cliffs, and distant snow-capped peaks were his usual companions. But today, the tranquility felt off. There was a hum in the air, not a sound, but a vibration he could feel in his chest. He paused, scanning the forest as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden rays through the trees. Then it happened. A blinding flash of blue light erupted in the sky, followed by a deep, resonating thrum that shook the ground. Ryan stumbled, clutching his equipment. Instinctively, he moved toward the source, curiosity and concern driving his steps. What he found left him speechless. Nestled in a clearing was a strange craft, half buried in the earth. Its smooth, metallic surface shimmered faintly, giving off an ethereal glow. Smoke billowed from fractured seams, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its sides. It was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. This was no human creation. His heart raced as he approached cautiously, the crunch of his boots on the forest floor seeming deafening in the eerie silence. That's when he saw her. She was lying near the craft, motionless. Her form was humanoid, but undeniably alien. Her skin shimmered like emerald silk, reflecting the faint light from the damaged ship. Long, silver hair fanned out around her head like a halo, and her features were both delicate and otherworldly. Ryan crouched beside her, his geologist's instincts giving way to something more primal, the need to help. "Hey," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" Her chest rose and fell faintly. She was alive, but barely. Without thinking, Ryan reached out to touch her shoulder, his fingers brushing against her cool skin. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing violet eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. They locked onto his, and for a moment, he felt as if the entire world had stopped. "You," her voice was soft, almost melodic, but strained. "You must help me." Ryan blinked, stunned. He hadn't expected her to speak, let alone in perfect English. I'll do what I can." "Are you hurt?" She coughed weakly, her gaze flickering to the ship. "The air, toxic." "I need energy," her voice faded, and her head lolled to the side. Ryan's mind raced. Toxic air. Energy. None of it made sense, but he couldn't just leave her. He quickly shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her slight frame, and assessed the situation. The craft was too damaged to provide shelter, and night was falling fast. The temperature would plummet, and if the air was truly affecting her, she wouldn't last long. Gritting his teeth, he slid his arms beneath her and lifted her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, her body strangely cool to the touch. "Hang in there," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The hike back to his campsite was grueling. The uneven terrain, combined with her weight and his own rising panic, made every step feel like a mile. But he pushed on, driven by the faint, rhythmic sound of her breathing. It was fragile, but it was there. By the time he reached his tent, the first stars were beginning to appear in the night sky. Gently, he laid her down on his sleeping bag and grabbed a canteen of water. He hesitated, unsure if it would help or harm her, but the desperate look in her eyes when she stirred convinced him to try. Supporting her head, he tilted the canteen to her lips. She sipped weakly, a small amount trickling down her chin. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan sat back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You're welcome, but I need answers. Who are you? What happened?" Her eyes opened fully for the first time, locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "I am Zevra," she said slowly, as if each word took immense effort. "My ship, it failed. I should not be here." Ryan frowned. "Where should you be?" Her gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of vulnerability in those luminous eyes. "Anywhere but here." She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch his. Your energy, it's unique. It can save me. He stared at her, his mind reeling. My energy? What does that even mean? You'll understand, she murmured before her eyes fluttered closed again. Ryan sat there in the stillness, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He didn't know who or what she was, but one thing was clear, she needed him. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt an overwhelming need to protect her. As the night deepened and the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, Ryan prepared himself for a long night ahead. Whatever came next, he knew his life would never be the same. Ryan barely slept that night. He sat beside Zevra, his mind racing with questions as the alien woman lay unconscious in his small tent. The glow of her skin had dimmed, her breath shallow but steady. What had she meant by his energy being unique? And how exactly was he supposed to save her? As the first light of dawn filtered through the canvas, Zevra stirred. Her violet eyes fluttered open, meeting Ryan's gaze. There was a spark of recognition, a faint flicker of gratitude. You stayed, she whispered, her voice still weak but steadier than before. Of course, I stayed, Ryan replied, leaning closer. You're in bad shape, and I need answers. Who are you, and what's happening to you? Zevra struggled to sit up, wincing as she moved. Ryan quickly helped her, propping her against his pack for support. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the small, makeshift campsite. My name is Zevra, she began, her tone soft but serious. Was, an explorer for my people. We travel between worlds, studying, observing, learning. But this planet. She paused, her gaze dropping. It is not suitable for my kind. The air, the elements, they're toxic to me. Without proper systems, I cannot survive here for long. Ryan frowned, trying to process her words. Then why are you here? What happened to your ship? She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the blanket he had draped over her. A malfunction, she admitted. My navigation systems failed, and I was pulled into your planet's gravity. I managed to land, but the impact destroyed the equipment I need to sustain myself. She looked up, her violet eyes shimmering with unspoken fear. I have hours, maybe a day, before the toxins overwhelm me completely. Ryan felt a knot tighten in his chest. She was stranded, dying, and entirely at his mercy. You mentioned my energy, he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. What did you mean by that? Zevra's expression softened, a faint blush, if that's what it was, coloring her emerald skin. My physiology is different from yours. To sustain ourselves in hostile environments, my people rely on bioenergy, life energy, if you will. It is, extracted through a connection with other living beings. But humans, she trailed off, her gaze locking with his. Your energy is unlike anything I've encountered. It is, abundant, powerful, and uniquely compatible with my own. Ryan blinked, his mind spinning. You're saying you need my energy to survive? Yes, she replied, her voice tinged with both hope and hesitation. But the process is, intimate. It requires trust, a willingness to share a part of yourself. I cannot take what is not freely given. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken tension. Ryan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. You're asking me to trust you, even though I barely know you. How do I know this won't hurt me? You don't, Zevra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I swear to you, I mean no harm. I would not take more than what you can safely give. I have no other choice. Ryan stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always considered himself a rational man, driven by facts and logic. But now, faced with an alien woman whose life depended on his trust, he felt his pragmatism faltering. Something in her eyes, a mixture of vulnerability and quiet strength, made it impossible for him to walk away. "Okay," he said finally, his voice firm despite the nervous energy coursing through him. "Tell me what I need to do." A small, relieved smile spread across Zevra's lips. "You are extraordinary," she said softly. "I promise, I will be careful." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as it hovered near his chest. "May I?" Ryan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. As her palm pressed gently against him, a warmth spread through his body. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was unlike anything he'd ever felt, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to connect him to something larger than himself. Zevra closed her eyes, her breathing steadying as the glow of her skin brightened. For a moment, the tent was filled with a soft, golden light that emanated from where her hand touched him. Ryan felt a strange mix of sensations, calm, exhilaration, and an unshakable connection to the woman before him. When the light faded, Zevra pulled her hand away, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier than before. "You've given me enough to sustain myself for now." Ryan exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. "That was intense," he said, his voice shaky but tinged with awe. Zevra smiled faintly, the color of her skin vibrant once more. "You are stronger than you realize, Ryan. Your willingness to help a stranger, even one as alien as me, it's remarkable." He shrugged, trying to mask his unease with humor. "Guess I'm just a sucker for a damsel in distress, even if she's from another planet." Her soft laugh filled the small space, a sound that made the tension ease just slightly. But as they sat in the quiet of the early morning, both of them knew that their challenges were far from over. Ryan sat on a log outside his tent, staring into the campfire as its flames licked the cool night air. Zevra was resting nearby, her luminous eyes following the flickering light. She looked stronger now, the vibrant emerald hue of her skin restored, but Ryan couldn't shake the weight of everything she'd told him. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "your people, they don't exactly mix with others much, do they?" Zevra's gaze shifted to him, her expression thoughtful. "We observe. We learn. But direct contact? No. It's forbidden. Emotional connections are seen as complications. Dangerous ones." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Sounds lonely." She tilted her head, her silver hair shimmering under the moonlight. "Loneliness is a concept we've learned to suppress. Emotions distract from our purpose." She paused, her voice softening. "But now, I wonder if we've misunderstood." Ryan poked at the fire with a stick, the embers glowing brightly. "You don't seem like the type to follow the rules." "Not entirely, at least." A small smile played on her lips. "Perhaps. There's something about your species, your resilience, your willingness to risk everything for someone you don't even know. It's inspiring." He shrugged. "Humans are weird like that. We mess up a lot, but when it counts, we try to do the right thing. Sometimes." He glanced at her. "What about you? You risked a lot just being here. Was it worth it?" Zevra looked away, her expression unreadable. "I didn't choose to come here, but meeting you has changed something in me. I feel things I've never felt before. Curiosity. Hope. And something else I don't understand." Her words hung in the air, and Ryan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He cleared his throat, brushing it off. "Well, if you're curious, there's plenty about Earth to see. Though I imagine the toxic atmosphere kind of puts a damper on sightseeing." Zevra's lips curved into a wry smile. "Perhaps you can be my guide. Show me what makes your world so remarkable." Ryan grinned, standing up and gesturing for her to follow. "All right, let's start small. Ever seen a coffee maker?" She followed him to the tent, her movements graceful yet hesitant. Inside, he pulled out a battered French press and a tin of ground coffee. This, he said, holding up the press like a prized artifact, is how most humans start their day. Coffee. Lifeblood of the sleep-deprived. Zevra leaned in, her violet eyes filled with curiosity. It's a device for creating energy. Ryan laughed. Sort of. It's a drink that wakes us up and keeps us going. Want to try? She hesitated but nodded. Ryan poured water into the press and prepared the coffee, the rich aroma filling the tent. When it was ready, he handed her a mug. Careful. It's hot. Zevra took a cautious sip, her expression shifting from curiosity to surprise. It's bitter. But intriguing. Humans consume this regularly. Every day, Ryan replied, smirking. Sometimes twice. Zevra studied the mug, her tone contemplative. Your species relies on so many external elements, food, water, substances like this. It's remarkable that you survive at all. Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms. We're stubborn like that. And resourceful. That's why we've made it this far. Their conversation continued late into the night. Ryan shared stories of Earth's history, its triumphs and struggles. Zevra listened intently, occasionally asking questions or sharing fragments of her own world. She spoke of towering crystalline cities, where her people lived in harmony with advanced technology, and of their endless quest for knowledge. But she also hinted at the emptiness of their lives, an existence devoid of deep connections. You know, Ryan said, watching her closely, it sounds like your people could learn a thing or two from humans. Maybe letting themselves feel wouldn't be such a bad thing. Zevra's gaze softened, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Perhaps. But emotions can lead to conflict, pain, even destruction. They can also lead to courage, love, and sacrifice, Ryan countered. You can't have the good without the bad. It's what makes life, well, life. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing his words. You speak as if you've experienced these things deeply. Ryan's smile faded. Let's just say I've had my share of ups and downs. But I wouldn't trade them for anything. They made me who I am. The fire crackled softly between them, and a comfortable silence settled over the camp. Ryan found himself studying Zevra, marveling at how alien yet familiar she seemed. There was something about her that stirred a part of him he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, of connection. As the night deepened, Zevra finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan, your world is extraordinary. And so are you. He met her gaze, his heart skipping a beat. You're not so bad yourself, Zevra. For the first time since their encounter, she laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made Ryan smile despite himself. In that moment, the barriers between them seemed to fade, leaving only two beings sharing a quiet connection under the starlit sky. The following morning, Ryan and Zevra continued their routine. Ryan worked on salvaging pieces of Zevra's wrecked ship while she adapted to her surroundings, her curiosity about Earth growing with each passing hour. They shared meals, stories, and moments of quiet camaraderie that felt surprisingly natural. But the peace was not meant to last. It started with a faint hum, low and rhythmic, vibrating through the air. Ryan paused, his wrench halfway to tightening a bolt on a piece of salvaged equipment. Zevra froze, her expression shifting from calm to alarm in an instant. What is it? Ryan asked, his voice tense. She stood, her eyes scanning the horizon. They're coming. Ryan frowned. Who's they? My people, she replied, her voice laced with both relief and dread. They've found me. Before Ryan could respond, a bright light pierced the sky, followed by the deafening roar of engines. A massive, sleek spacecraft descended into the clearing, its hull gleaming with an iridescent sheen. The air grew heavy with static as the ship's ramp extended, revealing three figures clad in gleaming armor, their forms imposing and unmistakably alien. Zevra stepped forward, her posture tense but composed. "I am Zevra of the 4th Exploration Fleet," she announced. "I am ready to return." One of the aliens, taller than the others and clearly in command, stepped forward. His gaze shifted from Zevra to Ryan, his expression hardening. "You violated protocol, Zevra," he said in a voice that carried authority and disdain. "You've compromised yourself, and us, by interacting with this human." Zevra squared her shoulders. "I had no choice. My survival depended on him." The commander's gaze flicked to Ryan, who stood his ground despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "This creature is insignificant. A contaminant. He should have been left to his primitive existence." "Hey," Ryan interjected, his tone sharp. "I'm standing right here." The commander ignored him, addressing Zevra. "Your actions have endangered our mission. You will be detained and assessed upon return." Zevra's eyes widened. "Detained? For surviving? For compromising our principles," the commander snapped. "Emotional entanglements with inferior species are strictly forbidden." Ryan stepped forward, anger flaring in his chest. "She's not compromised, she's alive because she made a choice. If that's a crime where you're from, then maybe your rules need rethinking." The commander's gaze turned icy. "You dare to speak of our laws, human? You are a child stumbling in the dark compared to us." Zevra moved between them, her voice firm. "Stop. This human saved my life. He risked his own well-being to help me. If you harm him, you'll have to answer to me." The other aliens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The commander hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her defiance. "You're willing to jeopardize your standing for this, creature?" Zevra lifted her chin, her gaze unwavering. "Yes. Because he has shown me something your rules could never teach. Compassion. Courage. Humanity." The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, the commander stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said coldly. "But this human cannot remain in our knowledge. His existence and involvement must be erased." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. "Erased? What does that mean?" "It means you will forget everything," the commander said, raising a device that began to hum ominously. "No!" Zevra shouted, stepping in front of Ryan. "You don't need to do this. I will take responsibility for my actions, but you will not harm him." The commander stared at her, his grip tightening on the device. "You would defy our laws for this?" "I would defy anything for what is right," Zevra said, her voice trembling with conviction. "This human taught me that." The commander hesitated, his expression torn between anger and reluctant respect. Finally, he lowered the device. "Very well. But know this, Zevra, you are no longer one of us. Your bond with this human has made you, other." Zevra's shoulders sagged slightly, but she remained resolute. "If that is the price of doing what is right, I will pay it." Without another word, the commander turned and signaled to the others. The aliens retreated up the ramp, the ship's engines roaring to life. Within moments, it ascended into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. Ryan exhaled, his knees threatening to give out. That was intense. Zevra turned to him, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "You shouldn't have been involved in this. I've made your life more complicated than it ever needed to be." Ryan shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "You think I'd trade this for another boring day of rock samples? Not a chance." Zevra chuckled softly, but the sound was tinged with sadness. "They won't let this go. My people don't forget." "Neither do I," Ryan replied, his voice firm. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the night settled over the forest, the bond between them felt unbreakable. They had stood against forces greater than themselves and emerged stronger for it. But both knew that the challenges ahead would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. The days that followed were marked by a fragile peace. Ryan and Zevra returned to their routine, but the weight of what had happened lingered between them. Zevra's people were gone, for now, but their warning echoed in her mind. She knew they would not stay away forever. Ryan, for his part, refused to let the threat dampen his resolve. He was determined to help Zevra, no matter the cost. One evening, as the sky blazed with the hues of a setting sun, Zevra sat by the campfire, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Ryan joined her, placing a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. She took it with a small smile, but her expression was distant. "They'll come back," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "Not to rescue me, but to enforce their laws. They won't forgive what I've done." Ryan nodded, staring into the fire. "Then we'll be ready." Zevra turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. "You don't understand. My people's technology is far beyond anything you can imagine. If they return, you won't be able to stop them. And I can't bear the thought of you being hurt because of me." Ryan met her gaze, his voice steady. "Zevra, I didn't save you just to give up now. We'll figure this out. Together." She hesitated, then reached out to place her hand over his. "There is one way," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But it would mean we can never see each other again." Ryan's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Zevra explained, her tone heavy with sorrow. "My ship's remnants still hold the power to create a temporary energy field, enough to cloak me from my people's detection and allow me to leave this planet. But it would drain every resource we've salvaged. There would be no way for me to return." Ryan's heart sank. The thought of losing her was unbearable, but the determination in her eyes told him she had already made her decision. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We can find another way." Zevra shook her head. "If I stay, they will come for both of us. This is the only way to keep you safe." Ryan clenched his fists, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "I don't care about safe. I care about you." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she seemed on the verge of tears. But she steadied herself, leaning closer until her forehead rested against his. "Ryan, you've shown me what it means to feel, to care, to love. You've given me more than I ever thought possible. But if I stay, it will only bring pain. This is my choice." Ryan swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then let me help you. If this is what you want, I'll see it through." They spent the next day working tirelessly, assembling the makeshift energy field from the scraps of her ship. The process was grueling, but they worked in perfect harmony, their shared determination driving them forward. By nightfall, the device was ready. As they stood before the humming apparatus, Zevra turned to Ryan, her expression both tender and resolute. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "For everything." Ryan took a shaky breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I should be thanking you. You've changed my life, Zevra. I don't know what I'll do without you." She stepped closer, her hands trembling as they cupped his face. "You'll live. You'll thrive. Because that's what humans do." She leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss filled with all the emotions they couldn't put into words, a mixture of love, gratitude, and heartbreak. When they pulled apart, Zevra stepped back, her violet eyes never leaving his. "Goodbye, Ryan," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the device. Before he could respond, the apparatus activated, surrounding her in a cocoon of light. For a brief moment, she was illuminated in radiant energy, her form almost too bright to look at. And then, with a final flash, she was gone. Ryan stood in the clearing, the silence deafening. The warmth of her touch still lingered on his skin, but the space around him felt unbearably empty. He stared at the spot where she had vanished, his chest aching with a mix of pride and loss. As the night deepened, he returned to the campfire, staring into the flames. In his hand, he held a small piece of her ship, a token she had left behind, a reminder of everything they had shared. He knew he would carry her memory with him always, a spark of light in the vastness of the universe.